Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to everyone to this public meeting tonight. A few house rules before we start. We are not expecting a fire drill this afternoon. If the alarm sounds, please exit the room by the fire exits and leave the building via the staircase in the foyer. Staff will guide you to the muster point. Toilets are available outside of the Hertford room in the foyer of the Mayor's Parlour. Can I please ask all mobile phones to switch to silent for the duration of the meeting? Can I also please draw your attention to the Council's protocol for recording, photography and use of social media, which is being distributed. Please note the permission to record does not extend to the public gallery and rights to the public must be respected. As chair, I will keep I will ensure the meeting keeps the time and draw it to close approximately at 7 p.m. So I just wanted, before we hand over for a presentation from Southern Water and Portsmouth Water, I thought I'd give a quick introduction as to why we're hosting a public meeting here tonight. As you all know, the borough's history is very much intrinsically linked to the Bedhampton Springs, which is known for its acclaimed spring water, which I'm drinking here in front of me today. It's one of the best chalk springs in the UK, and we're capable of filling 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day. The name of Havant actually does derive from the spring of Hammer, which is Hampunta, and actually Havant is where its name is built upon the spring itself. Our economy is one that was built on the high quality fresh water from water mills to parchment manufacture. Today, these springs supply the city of Portsmouth, surrounding areas, fresh water, and I know residents value the high quality of water that we are fortunate enough to drink. However, we appreciate there are many challenges coming over the horizon. Our growing population and need for economic growth means there is a rising need for water, and that is also at a time of climate change. And that will increase the amount we need even further whilst reducing supply. I would think everyone in the room will also recognise the water stressed nature of the southeast and our need to adapt to the challenges of a warmer climate. Myself and Hampton Borough Council supported the application which was granted for Havant Thicket Water Storage Reservoir. This will help with the increased regional demand for water and the need to protect delicate habitats of the River Test and Itchen. It will also provide excellent new destination for the borough with footpath business centre for our communities to enjoy. Nevertheless, since the council granted planning permission for the reservoir, the proposal has emerged to use recycled water to top up the spring water which will go into the reservoir. This is clearly a significant change and initiative from Southern Water, which has differed, as we know, substantially from the original application from Portsmouth Water for a spring water reservoir. Water recycling is a new technology in the United Kingdom, and as a resident myself, I want to be fully reassured that our drinking water will remain of the highest quality. There have been, and there will be, several opportunities for local residents to feed their views into the proposal. But I thought it was vital, due to the high-profile nature of the proposals, we call this public meeting tonight so that residents can hear directly from the water companies and make their views known. Consultation is currently taking place by both water companies and their draft water resource management plans, which are open until the 20th of February. The Council Cabinet approved Hampton Borough Council's responses to these consultations last Tuesday. This sets out the council's position regarding the scheme. We remain unconvinced water recycling is the best way to increase water supply in the area. We do not consider the case for water recycling at Havant Thicket has been fully developed. It's still noted as an option, which suggests it may not be needed or there may be an alternative. For instance, better demand management and increased capacities at other water reservoirs would reduce demand for water being supplied by sources such as water recycling. There seems to be a lot of work needs to be done before the next consultation on the project, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the next steps will be taking place from those representing the two water companies tonight. And all of this, is, as we know, is a background against clearly some of the concerns that we and residents have of Southern Water due to, as we know, separate but issues around the company, and that not least due to the £90 million fine for 6,971 unpermitted sewage discharges that they have Southern Water have had that fine. And whilst I acknowledge that Southern Water have stated and they've changed the company, there does need to be a long-lasting commitment and proven action to show that this change is genuine. And in this context, a project being proposed, if mishandled, is something that we know is worrying. One thing that is really critical to highlight at the start of the night is that this is being designated by government as a nationally significant infrastructure project. This means that the decision on whether it will be granted planning consent will be made by the Secretary of State, represented by a planning inspector through a process known as the Development Consent Order. The Council does and will continue to be closely involved as the scheme progresses, feeding in relevant information and views to Southern Water, and will formally respond to consultations. However, in this case, the Council's role is to represent our community, such as tonight, and we are not the final decision makers. It is a role that we are holding a meeting tonight, and we'll bring together our residents and the two water companies so direct questions can be posed about how fresh water supply in the future and a project which will fundamentally change the key part of our borough. The issues discussed tonight and brought up will be noted down and added to the Council's response before it's submitted. So we are planning to add an appendix to our consultation response with a summary of some of the things discussed and highlighting some of the concerns that residents are going to talk about tonight at this meeting. So your voice is being heard tonight, and we'll be including that as part of our Council's consultation response. In terms of the agenda for this evening, there'll be a joint presentation from the two water companies, which we've asked to keep to 30 minutes, leaving as much time as possible for your questions. We've had questions submitted beforehand, and thank you to everyone who sent them in. But if you haven't, there will still be an opportunity to ask your questions as well this evening, and it'll be by show of hands later on. So that explains the background. So I'll now pass over to the water company, so Portsmouth Water to my left and Southern Water to my right, who are going to do a joint presentation for the next 30 minutes, and then we'll go to a Q&A. So over to you to introduce yourself and start presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Councillor Reddy and colleagues at Havant Borough Council for organising this evening's meeting. We really appreciate and welcome the opportunity to talk you through our plans for water recycling in the Havant area, which is one of 4 schemes of water recycling plants that we have in our current water resources management plans. My name's Sam Underwood. I'm Southern Water's Stakeholder Manager for our Water for Life Hampshire programme. I'm joined by my colleagues Ian, Varsha and James here this evening, as well as colleagues from Portsmouth Water, and our programme director Rob is here as well. So we're going to walk you through some slides, and while we're presenting, there'll be a bottle of water. Sorry. Too low. Right. Project, Samuel. Project. And a bit closer. Okay. No. Okay. Nick, we might need to crank up the volume a bit. Okay. So while we're just sorting that out, folks. While we're presenting, there'll be a bottle of water that's going to make its way around the audience for you to have a look at. It's circulating as we speak. This is reverse osmosis water that's been through our water recycling plant over at Bud's Farm. It's not safe to drink because it hasn't been chlorinated yet, but if it was chlorinated and remineralised, then it would be to drinking water standards. So it just hopefully will reassure you of the quality, cleanliness of the water that we propose to put into the reservoir. So while we're here, can't hear me, crikey. Shall I just shout? That might be easier. Yes. Okay. And it didn't appear the curtain was the problem there, did it? But we're going to have to work with that, aren't we? Because I'm not going to get that gremlin sorted. Okay, folks, so in this presentation, we're going to give you an overview of the water recycling plans and the technology that's involved. We're going to allay, hopefully, some of the concerns that you have about water recycling. And we can reassure you that Southern Water and Portsmouth Water are working really closely together with experts from around the world and with our regulators to ensure that these plans safely and sustainably secure water supplies for Hampshire. Okay, so the bottle's being passed around at the moment, and we'll take questions at the end. I think it's important that we just understand what Yep, we're still slipped off the edge of the screen there. We understand the difference between stormwater, recycled water and spring water. As the wastewater company for this area, Southern Water operates stormwater overflows to protect homes from flooding. This is a wholly separate system, like the overflow on a bath, that's there to protect homes from flooding during heavy rain. Recycled water is fully treated wastewater that's been further purified through a series of advanced treatment processes, which my colleague Varsha will talk you through shortly. Thank you. This might be easier. Can everyone hear me now? Can everyone hear me now? Okay, right, thank you. Do I need to restart? I don't think we've got time. We're on intros, right? Okay, someone suggested. Okay, and so recycled water is fully treated wastewater that's gone through these further series of treatment processes, which my colleague Varsha will come on to in a second. And then spring water. So it's spring water that will be in the reservoir as well, and will be the main source of water for the Havant Thicket Reservoir. And spring water is water that's risen from the ground. There's an assumption that spring water is completely pure, ready to drink, etc. It's not. It has decades worth of nutrients from agricultural practices, from geology, etc. in it. And so we're here to talk a bit about the difference and similarities between those types of water this evening. And it's important that we recognise the regional context as well. So my colleague Jim from Portsmouth Water will fill you in now on the regional context for not only this project, but the wider water resources management plans as well.
Good afternoon. So I'm Jim Barker. I'm head of water resources at Portsmouth Water. I'll keep talking unless someone waves. I assume you can hear me. Yeah. So, okay. So in the water industry, we plan water resources as a region. So there's 6 water companies in the southeast, from Thames Water, Southern Water, Southeast Water, Sutton East Surrey Water, Affinity Water, and ourselves. We look after the southeast corner of the UK, and we plan as a unit, and we share water as a unit, because the challenges we face in the southeast are quite high. So the southeast is water stressed. We have a growing population, as I'm sure you're all aware, and also with climate change, we have an environment which is, in our corner of the southeast, is fairly unique with the chalk. We have an environment that's coming under increasing stress because we're seeing different changes in rain patterns. So the water we take today, it may not be suitable to take tomorrow or in 10 years' time if we're going to maintain the health of our rivers. So what we're looking to do in water resource planning terms is to balance the stress of demand, how much water we need to supply, versus supply the amount of water we have available without causing environmental damage. And that's a bit of a juggling act. As was mentioned earlier, we currently have, both companies have our draft water resource management plans out for consultation. So every 5 years we produce a long-term plan. We refresh them every 5 years. Out to consultation right now is our current view of how we're going to close the gap between supply and demand for the next 50 years. So we've got a view out to 2050. And there's some quite big numbers in there. We are looking at a deficit of 2.7 billion litres of water by 2075 for the southeast as a whole. So we are looking for different ways we can close the gap. Some of that is through asking people to use less water, and we can do that through metering or through communication or through linking people's water use with the environment and asking people to use less. We're seeing things like white goods and new generations of household appliances using less and less water. But we do also need to find new sources of water that are environmentally stable. And I guess that's the kind of conversation tonight. So we've made the case for Havant Thicket Reservoir as we currently have permission for. We made that in our last WRMP. That's going ahead. We are legally obliged to deliver that and all the environmental positives that brings. But we are also beholden to look at opportunities to find new water if they are sustainable. And the conversation tonight is around, can we use Havant Thicket in a slightly different way in order to start closing that gap locally? So that's the context of that. So I wanted to hand back to colleagues from Southern, and you'll see me again in a minute.
Thanks, Jim. And so we've heard mention of the test and itching rivers this evening, and you'll have seen it in Southern Waters literature as well. The rivers that we are seeking to protect with this project. So something like 85% of the world's chalk streams are in this country, and these are rivers that are fed by natural and underground springs from the chalk sources. And two of the finest examples in Hampshire are the Test and the Itchen, and in this area the Meon and the Ems as well. These are delicate ecosystems. They're home to a wide variety of wildlife. They're often referred to as our rainforests or even our snow leopards. They're that rare. And we need to take dramatically less water from these rivers and the aquifers in order to protect them during a drought. We're under strict instruction from the Environment Agency to do so. And we welcome that instruction because we recognise that over-abstraction of these rivers is potentially damaging to the wildlife there. Because these rivers also serve 700,000 people with water for Hampshire. So we need to look for new sources of water. We've got a huge deficit to make up, 192 million litres a day. We need to find that water from a new source that isn't a river, isn't an aquifer, and isn't the sea. We've been through desalination consultation. We put forward plans for a desalination plant in Fawley, and we can discuss potentially in the Q&As section why that didn't work. So in the face of climate change and a growing population, we face a really stark choice now, have to strike the right balance between keeping taps and rivers flowing and making sure that we are protecting the environment. And so the project that we are here to talk about specifically this evening is one of a suite of schemes that we need to bring online. So we're tackling leakage to drive that down. We're improving water efficiency, working with Portsmouth Water to build the Havant Thicket Reservoir. So there's lots of schemes that are underway, but we also need a new big source of water. Now, I mentioned we'd look to the sea for a solution with desalination, but actually there's a better answer here. We already highly treat 1,500 litres a second of treated wastewater at Budds Farm Wastewater Treatment Works and release it 5.7 kilometres out to sea. And that water is then wasted. It's really clean. We've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy to make it clean, and it's pumped out 5.7 kilometres to sea. We can tap into that source of water using technology that's been widely used around the world for 40 years to clean that water, purify that water, and use it as a drinking water source. So the scheme, as you'll see on the screen here, would be to tap into water from the Budds Farm Treatment Works, treat it at a new water recycling plant, and Varsha will talk through the technology in a second, and then pump that water to the reservoir, where it would then supplement the spring flows in the reservoir, when crucially, during summer months, the spring flows will have fallen away. And we would use the long sea outfall from our Budds Farm Treatment Works to release the reject stream from that process as well. And of course, you'll see the large 40-kilometre pipeline to take that water from the reservoir up to our Otterbourne Water Supply Works, where it will be given further treatment before going into supply. I'm going to hand over to Varsha now, who's going to talk through water recycling.
You know what happens when they give me a mic? I sing. No, I don't do that. I am pathetic. My name is Varsha Wiley. I'm a principal engineer with Southern Water, and I've been in industry for about, I want to say 21 years now. If anybody asks, I'm 30 years old. No, I'm not. The point why we're here today, the 3 takeaways I really want you to take home with you today. If there are 3 points, even if you don't remember anything I talk about, these 3 points are really key. Some of these points have been articulated by Sam already, and some of them perhaps you would know as well, but these are, number 1, this technology is not new. The scheme, the approach, the way we're doing water recycling, putting recycled water into a reservoir is not new. It's been practiced for over decades in places where Tracy and I had a chat about this, in places like California, Australia, Singapore. Singapore, it rains a lot, but they still have to do it for water demand and supply reasons. That's number 1. So it's proven technology, it's proven approach. That's key takeaway, number 1. Number 2, it is not a CSO system. CSOs are, and again, Sam mentioned that before, they're relief systems. This is a pumped flow system. There is no opportunity for flows from the source, which is Budds Farm pumping station or final effluent or treated effluent pump station, to go up to Havant Thicket on its own. It can't do that. There is no physical bypass to the system to allow it to do that in the way that CSOs work. So Nigel, to your point before, pollution due to final effluent or treated wastewater from Butts Farm going and polluting Havant Thicket Reservoir is not possible. We haven't put this infrastructure in, and water doesn't climb by itself uphill. That would be really tricky. Third, we are governed by strict regulation, whether they are environmental ones, drinking water quality ones. We are, I was expecting that. I was expecting it because the drinking water that we have in this country, the drinking water that we produce in this country is, and I've lived in many countries, it's far superior than what I've drunk before, right? That's number one. The point is we're treating to better quality than that.
I'm only fair they have a chance to do the presentation, so can we make sure we don't interject, please? Thank you.
It's okay, but from a technical standpoint, that's what I can tell you, right? There are two differences between operationally where things have gone wrong, and I'm not going to stand here and say, sorry, it wasn't our fault. There are things we need to recognize, and that's true, and we are recognizing it. That's one of the reasons why we're here today. But the other thing that's fundamentally right for me is these regulations do exist, and we have to abide by them. Please don't heckle again. So coming back to the flow chart and the technical point, now that we know what the 3 takeaway points are, let's focus on the technology and what's going on. The first box that you see over there is our integrated membrane system. Right in there sits a microfiltration plant, a reverse osmosis plant, and what these two treatment processes do, they remove a lot of the pathogens, the impurities, the solids, the bacteria. Crypto is one of the elements that get removed by the microfiltration process, and we have a microfiltration process plant at Otterbourne already. We operate that, we're familiar with it. There's one at Arundel as well that we are familiar with, we operate, and we know how that system works. The reverse osmosis plant, on the other hand, that is the bit where a lot of, I've seen a question before around E. coli, hormones and pharmaceuticals. This is where your reverse osmosis plant comes in, and it allows you to remove that to a degree where you are comfortable that long chain pharmaceuticals would get removed, and viruses, for the most part, not all viruses are made equal, but even the tiny ones would get removed through this process. So that's the membrane treatment process. The advanced oxidation process mops up anything that may have gone through the RO, and that's really important. These are the multi-barrier treatment processes that we're putting in place such that we're able to remove those residual contaminants in that treated effluent, because the wastewater works does a great job already. I wouldn't swap that for anything else, but this treatment process removes it even further. And as Sam said before, it removes it to a point where in some places in California, and Tracy has read the papers that I've sent her, hopefully, this water is ready to be accepted as drinking water. I'm sure somebody's going to laugh again, but I'm going to move on. Once we've gone through the advanced oxidation process, we've applied UV, we've applied hydrogen peroxide, this water is now fully disinfected. But what happens when we go through the RO process, it removes calcium, magnesium, and carbonates, which are really key part of mineralization of our water. That's what gives water its taste, its stability, and so on. We have to put that back in. But what it doesn't show on these boxes here is that there's a step between the treated water conditioning and the advanced oxidation process. That's granule activated carbon. That allows us to remove any other compounds that may have formed during disinfection. It mops that up. And we use granulated activated carbon right now in most of our water supply works. When it comes to treated water conditioning, this is us adding the calcium back, adding the magnesium back, adding the carbonates back. And we're looking to now add them to a level that we know when we're blending it with Havant Thicket water, which will be predominantly spring water, we're able to meet the water chemistry of that water. So that's one of the biggest challenges, really, is to meet that chemistry such that we're able to get the taste where it needs to be. I hope all that makes sense. I'm just going to plow on. Where was I? Treated water conditioning. Now, any process as we know it will produce a reject stream. That's only normal. And that reject stream in this case will be blended back with any residual flows from Butts Farm and be taken out into the Long CR4 to meet the permit for discharge. I'm looking at you because I know I'm going to get a question on that later perhaps. So as we go from left to right in terms of the treatment, We've looked at number 1, 2, 3, 4 in Havant Thicket blended water. What have I missed? I think I am just about right. Where am I? 6. Oh, Otterbourne. Otterbourne and Farlington. Sorry, I missed that one. Otterbourne and Farlington. So what happens when water comes out of Havant Thicket Res? It will get pumped across 40 kilometers, as Sam showed in his diagram before, across to Otterbourne for further treatment and then back into supply, right? It will blend in times of no drought times. It will blend with natural sources at Otterbourne, that's the River Itchen and the groundwater. And at Farlington, it will be treated further as well. So I think that's me. Shall I go next? All right. Oh, there was a question I actually thought I needed to address whilst I'm here, because I think it's really pertinent. There was a question around control harmful chemicals to human and aquatic life in sewage and how these processes require careful monitoring. That's a really, really good question. Mike Owens, Alison Mayer and gang, that's a really good question. So there are monitors that are used around the world for exactly that. Total organic carbon is one of these measures. Turbidity is the other one. Oxidation reduction potential, big name, ORP, really important. So these are the fundamental ones are conductivity, total organic carbon, and turbidity. So these are markers that allow you to know whether you've had any contaminants that have passed through the system. And before, one thing before I go, anywhere after point number 3, there will be a great big water storage tank on site. It will be the last control point where we will have all of the treatment processes controlled before it can get pushed forward into Havant Thicket. Minus that, the water goes back to where it started its journey, as in back to Budswell. Yes, I think I saw you. Is that later?
So we're going to Q&A afterwards. So hold fire any questions. We've got plenty of time for questions afterwards. So keep going the presentation.
I'm good. I think I've answered it, hopefully. That's me. Thank you. Do I need to? I'm going to now pass you on to James Kisak.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Kisak. I'm the Senior Project Design Lead for Southern Water on the Water Recycling Project. I've been in the industry about 20 years with a civil and mechanical engineering background. So the first thing I'd like you to think about is the reservoir, not as spring water, but its own unique body of water in its own right. It'll have various impurities and compounds within it, which will be a function of the source water that will enter into that reservoir. So initially, that'll be obviously the spring water, rainwater, and the various feeder streams. But those various impurities will also be impacted on by various environmental and ecological factors. So, for example, sedimentation within the bottom of the reservoir, or the interaction with birds, mammals, and fish. Due to the advanced full treatment process that Vash has just taken us through, we are confident that the recycled water will be much purer than those other sources of water. Southern Water have entered into a water quality modelling assessment where we've looked at 2 years worth of modelling to see how the recycled water will look to interact with that reservoir water. And what we've seen as part of that is that actually the recycled water will look to actually start to dilute those various impurities in the reservoir. Now, on the screen here, you can see a graph that shows nitrate predictions over a 2-year period that we modelled. And we choose nitrate here as the example because of its continuous use, as Sam alluded to earlier, in fertiliser for agricultural crops. And the study's shown that actually it leachates down and absorbs down into the ground and makes its way into groundwater sources. So what we actually find is that comparatively, the reservoir water will be quite high in nitrate, and this is due to the average 30 milligrams per litre that's contained within the spring water. Now, with the introduction of the recycled water at 0.3 milligrams per litre, we actually see a reduction in those nitrates over that 2-year period. Now, for the keen eye, you'll notice that there is an increase on the right-hand side of that graph. Now, that is because as part of our modelling scenario, we looked at a 1 in 200 year drought event. And that increase in nitrate is actually the reintroduction of spring water into the reservoir to refill the reservoir after that drought period. Now, clearly these water quality modelling exercises need to continue, and they will. They'll feed into our environmental impact assessments and then into our preliminary environmental impact report, which will be a key component of our next public consultation. So that is me on that slide. skip slide, apologies.
Hi there, me again. So just to remind you about Havant Thicket as currently planned, really. So we're really proud of Havant Thicket as a proposal that we have planning permission for. So it is going to provide a new sustainable source of water for the southeast. We're equally proud of the green infrastructure that will go around it. So the visitor centre, the leisure facilities, the 200 acres of woodland, the wetland to the northern boundary, all these things we are very proud of. And as we go forward and as we look at possible new opportunities that the reservoir gives us, and we've just heard from Varsha about the possibility of using recycled water. You know, this is technologies used elsewhere in the world, but I wanted to assure you all that we are so proud of the green credentials of Havant Thicket Reservoir that we need to be convinced too, as a Portsmouth Water, as the owner of the reservoir, that everything that Southern Water say is true, because we don't want to undo. You can laugh, but the science is there. So we need to assure ourselves as well that we won't have a negative impact on the plans we already have and are seeing through to fruition. So whilst we are in support of the development of this project and looking at the science and looking at the possibilities, as I said earlier, there is a definite need to find new sustainable sources of water in our corner of the world, definitely. But we need to be convinced it's safe too. So we're looking for the outcome of all the science. We're working with Southern on the science to make sure that nothing goes backwards from our current planning permissions. I think that's really important to say. And then just a little bit of a plug at the end. So you might well have seen the fact that we are consulting on a new pipeline route for the original Havant Thicket Reservoir pipeline route. What's effectively happened is our original planning application was to do open trench pipe laying, so literally digging up roads, putting the pipes in, tarmacking back over. And you can see on the red line, sorry, on the map over there, it was pretty wriggly and followed quite a lot of roads up through Lee Park. Now we have a major contractor in place. They've kind of gone, well, actually, we could do this with less disruption by digging tunnels. And the circles on that map are shafts where they will dig vertically down, and they'll put drilling machines in and dig tunnels in straighter lines for an equivalent cost. So what we're doing, we need to vary our planning consent to do that. So that's the consultation out now. What we're not doing is what's the word I'm after? Preempting, sorry, lost my words. What we're not doing is preempting what we're talking about today with the recycled water, but what we are doing is looking at the possibility of making a tunnel big enough so if this did happen in the future, we wouldn't have to dig a whole new tunnel. We could use one tunnel to take both pipes. But it's something we would be doing anyway because it's better than digging up half of Lee Park to lay pipes for 5 years. So I just wanted to clear that up in case there was some confusion. So I think that's the end of me. Over to you.
Good evening. I'm Ian Frost, Planning and Consents Lead for Southern Water. So we held our second public consultation in summer last year, and that consultation talked about the need for the project, the preferred corridor for the pipelines, the possible locations for above ground plants, the site for the water recycling plant, and the processes for water recycling and constructing the pipelines. And we had a really good response. Over 9,000 people visiting the website and our virtual exhibition room. Nearly 900 people came along to one of our local events, and it was great to talk to a lot of people there. And over 500 people responded to our questionnaire, for which we are very grateful. And we had some really valuable feedback, which has been reported in our feedback report, which you can find on our website, and is being used to inform how we continue to develop these proposals. Engagement and consultation is a key focus for us and an essential part of the planning process. Following further design work this year and carrying out a wide range of assessments, we will be looking to have a further public consultation where people will again have the opportunity to have their say, prior to any application being submitted to the Planning Inspectorate. And of course, throughout the period, we will continue to engage closely with all the local authorities within which our proposals are located, with landowners, as well as with all the environmental bodies and our regulators with an interest in the project. As you can see from this indicative programme, there will be numerous opportunities for local communities and others to continue to comment on and influence the project as it's developed. And that takes us to Q&A.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all our presenters tonight. So now we've heard the presentations from Portsmouth Water and Southern Water. We will have a Q&A session, as mentioned. Due to time constraints and to give everyone a fair opportunity to ask a question, we will not have follow-ups. However, if the time allows at the end, we will have follow-ups then. We have had questions submitted to us in advance from residents and representatives of local community groups. Some of your submissions ask very similar points, so these have been grouped together, and I will read those ones out where they've been grouped. Where individual questions have been submitted in advance, I will invite residents to read these out if they are here. Otherwise, I'll read them out on your behalf. We'll intersperse submitted questions with questions from the floor. Question from the floor, I would ask you to raise your hand and a roving mic will come to you. For anyone watching online, please submit any questions they may have to ask us at havant.gov.uk. The first two questions, firstly, to ask 2 questions submitted in advance, and then it'll be 2 questions on the floor. So it'll be a sort of 2 questions, then 2 questions on the floor. So that's how it will generally work. If there are unanswered questions by the end of the session, please send these to askers@havant.gov.uk again, or paper and pens available at the back of the room here, and we'll make sure that those are sent to Southern Water and Portsmouth Water following the meeting, and we'll be asking them to respond to you. So hopefully that'll be ample opportunity to ask as much questions as you possibly can. So we'll move swiftly on to the first question I've got here. And this has been submitted by a number of people, and it was kind of all on the same subject, really. So that includes the Havant Borough Residents Association, the Hailing Sewage Watch, the Hailing Island Residents Association, Andy McMinn, Susan Oliver, and Sue Doxett. So and we've kind of summed it up as the following. So the questions cite considerable concerns with Southern Water. Notably, Southern Water was described as criminal, quote unquote, by a High Court judge in a 2021 prosecution case and fined £90 million. And according to Southern Water's own data, releasing untreated sewage into environmentally protected harbours for 2,000 hours during October, November, and December of that year. Considering this, how can the public trust Southern Water to safely run the recycling plant and provide treatment of drinking water to the minimum standards set by regulators? So Sam, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Rennie. It's a really good question. There is an issue of trust here. Can you not hear me? Shall I grab that mic? Sorry, the lady there is saying she can't hear. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Try different. Okay.
Thanks very much, Jane. Okay, should we try that again? So it's a really good question. There is an issue of trust here. There's no escaping Southern Water's reputation because of some of the incidents and issues, pollutions, etc. in the past. I'd ask you to remember, though, that those incidents, those issues, that the court case which Councillor Rennie has just referenced was several years ago. It took a long time to come to fruition. There have been wholesale changes at Southern Water since then. I've been with Southern Water for 13 years. I've seen the biggest period of change at Southern Water in the last 5 years, and for the better. I would not be sat here today, and neither would my colleagues, defending Southern Water's honour if we didn't know that it was worth defending, and if we weren't assured that everybody within Southern Water, from the chief exec right down to the guys and girls who operate our sites, are fully committed to protecting the environment and to serving our customers. And that's exactly what these water recycling plans are setting out to do. We've got a huge improvement plan that's underway. We've got a long way to go, but we've made great steps already. Last year, we cut pollutions by 37%. That's a significant amount, and we'll continue to do so. We'll continue to improve, and we will look forward to regaining your trust and faith in the future. We don't expect it now, and we understand why, but we look forward to this dialogue continuing and regaining that trust in the future.
Thank you very much, Sam. The next question was regarding sort of the how to remove harmful chemicals from the water, and I think you've answered that question during the presentation directly.
Right.
So no, that's fine. So I won't go to that one. So I'll invite two questions from the floor. The first hand at the back, there we are.
Who was going to ask me questions?
Okay, well, so we'll go over there and then to the next one. That's fine.
Hi, I'm a resident of Portsmouth, been involved with, if you like, the Southern Water issues of effluent going places we don't want it to go. I think part of our problem with trust of Southern Water is that when you look to find out who they are, what their name is, who's behind them, who's financing them, who benefits from all the investment, it gets into an area of real sort of dark matter. And I'd like to ask the simple question, what is your name? What is the name of the company? Because if you look at Southern Water on Company's House, you get into this.
So I think that
it is important. This
yeah,
it's very
I
important.
think
This because you want
I,
trust. If you want trust, you've got to be transparent. You've got to be clear. And there's nothing clear or transparent about the business model. And if you look at where the money comes from and the money goes, because we're all customers, we all pay money. And you know, if you want us to carry on trusting you and then paying our money, it'd be nice to have a little bit of clarity. And so if I ask you, what's your name? I mean, the company, are you Southern Water Services Limited? Are you Southern Water Services Group Limited? Are you Southern Services Green Span? I mean, who the heck are you?
So I think it'd be a good opportunity just to answer the question on. I think to summarise, I think it's a question about ownership structure of Southern Water. So you know, who owns Southern Water and what the ownership structure is. Sam.
Yeah, thank you to the gentleman for the question. Sorry, I'll pull this forward. All water companies are privatised since 1989. All water companies have complex financial structures. I'm not an expert in those, and neither are my colleagues on the panel here this evening. What we can tell you is we are Southern Water. We are the people behind the company. We are the people behind the corporation, and we are the people who are working hard to deliver the improvements that you expect and we expect as well. I will take your feedback back to my colleagues in our communications department who are putting together our annual report at the moment, and we will look to see how we can be more open and transparent about ownership, etc. Because clearly it's not meeting your expectations or the expectations of others in the room. But just to be clear, this is not an anomaly for Southern Water to have complex financial structures. It's the process of privatisation. And let's not forget just how much investment has happened since privatisation into the water infrastructure, and the fact that pre-privatisation we were putting a third more water into supply than we are now, Southern Water. So we've cut leakage significantly and improved water efficiency since privatisation to the extent where we're putting a third less water into supply, and that's including a growing population and the impacts of climate change.
Would you mind if I answer?
I know. So I'm conscious that there's lots of questions to get through, and I know we could go follow-ups all night, and I'm conscious I want to get around the room. And if there's a time at the end, there's an opportunity for follow-up. So next question, at the front, yeah.
Hello, my name is Martin Ward. I'm a resident of the borough. May I ask two things? Why did Portsmouth Water and Southern Water not circulate their consultation plans and offers together with bills through to customers when on a regular basis I receive a lot of paperwork about insurance schemes and things like this? That would have been appropriate juncture. The second thing is, although you say there's been additional investment since 1989 with privatisation, is it not correct? Or will you be able to confirm that the dividends paid out have almost exactly matched the investment that's gone in?
Two questions there. In terms of the timings of consultation materials, regrettably, at the times of the consultations, it didn't coincide with the annual billing of customers' bills in this area. But we are working with our customer team to make sure that we have that opportunity and we can include information in customers' bills. Ian may want to add to that in terms of the timing. And then in terms of privatisation and dividends to shareholders, actually Southern Water's shareholders haven't taken dividends for several years over the last 5-10 years. There's information about that on our website, and that's due to the company's performance over that time. But that's the model of privatisation. Love it or loathe it, those are the parameters which privatised corporations operate within. What we're here to do is to put the face behind that corporation so that you can hopefully start to see that there are people behind Southern Water, people who are working hard to do good things.
Thanks, Sam. So the next question is being submitted by Anne Skennerton on behalf of the Hayling Line Residents Association and Susan Oliver. So the question is, who will be monitoring the water quality in the reservoir? Would this be independently monitored, and how often will this be monitored? How will the reservoir be cleaned if it becomes contaminated? And who have the power to act if there are any potential failures in maintaining high water quality or polluting the reservoir? Okay, so just for those that didn't hear that, the question was how do residents access that data and can understand that information, and how is that going to be publicised? Sam.
Yeah, and Varsha will talk you through the regulatory kind of framework and testing in a second. But it's a really good point about the public-facing data and information. So James referenced the water quality assessments that we're undertaking at the moment. We'll be publishing those in the coming year. We're not waiting till the next consultation on the plans. We'll publish them on our website. We'll publish them, promote them through the council, etc. as well, so that people can see our working and can trust that process and have a look behind that process. I would really like us to be having live telemetry that can be hosted on our website, so you can see the water quality going into the reservoir. I don't want a phone call every time there's a dead fish in the reservoir or a bit of algae on the reservoir and then an assumption that there's an issue with the water quality, because believe me, as Varsha said, there's no way that water would be going into the reservoir if it wasn't meeting the stringent standards that are required. But we need to make sure that people can see that. So using an example that we already have in operation, which is Beach Boy. So this is our spill reporting system on the stormwater side of the business, and it's challenging, isn't it? And it's okay, bad reference, but okay, can we get some marks for effort with Beach Boy? I was one of the individuals, people in Southern Water, one of my and two other colleagues, who in our talks with Langston Harbour Board, with surfers, with harbour users, beach users, people understood the need for stormwater releases, but they wanted to know when they happened so that they can make an educated choice about whether or not to go into the sea. So we published our telemetry live, and it caused all sorts of issues because telemetry misfires and all sorts of, and we're revisiting that at the moment. Just had a meeting last week with a colleague with a whole new interface on the front end of Beach Boy to make it much more user friendly. But the effort is there on our part to be open and transparent. These are very complex systems, but we want to show you the working of it and for you to understand and see the process of it and have access to that. And so certainly that's an intention in terms of the water quality going into the reservoir, that there would be live telemetry to show that that continues to meet the high standards that we expect, that Portsmouth Water expect, and that residents expect.
A lot of old people. There are a lot of elderly people who may not actually use the internet, and you see that in the shops. You can see how many people do not. They pay their bills at the post office, and they can't access the internet. How will they receive that information? Because I've been talking to a lot of people before this meeting, and there were so many people said, "What are you talking about? We don't know about any meeting. We don't know about any reverse osmosis or whatever." They knew nothing about it, and that has to be a mistake.
No, so certainly our intention is to get out and talk to as many people as possible. We're getting out to community groups and organisations through the consultation. So we have a team that works with vulnerable groups and all sorts of clubs and societies, etc., to promote water efficiency and our efforts to tackle leakage, and to help customers then see where the opportunities are for support, whether it's support with their bills if they're struggling to pay their bills, or what to do in an emergency. So those colleagues have been been sharing information about the consultations. We absolutely need to do more. There's absolutely more to do, and so we really welcome views and feedback from people as to the types of, whether it's the groups or organisations or customers that we're missing currently. What can we do to help to get the message out there to them, whether it's through local networks, from councillors themselves supporting. We've had great support from councillors in sharing information as well. So there's more to do, but we're trying hard.
Okay, thanks, Sam. The next question is from Anne Buckley and Mike Owens. That's on behalf of the Havant Borough Residents Association, the Hailing Sewage Watch. Many local stakeholders worked very hard for years on the plans for the Havant Thicket Reservoir. Events like the Staunton Water Festival built confidence and trust in Portsmouth Water, and this large infrastructure project that had demonstrated environmental gain was agreed with very little objection. The current proposal was Southern Water to pump treated effluent to the reservoir is unlikely to receive the same support and acceptance. We trusted you, Portsmouth Water, and would no longer do so. Will you have any misgivings about working with Southern Water, and how will you rebuild that trust of residents and demonstrate environmental gains? Probably one for you, Bob.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Can you hear this one? Okay. Yeah, it's a really good question, and probably one that goes through my mind almost every day in this role. I mean, I think it's very clear that there are different views from customer base of Southern and Portsmouth, but I think it comes back to the basic question that Jim tried to illustrate in his slide about water resources. You know, we are in a difficult area in the UK, the most difficult, in fact, from a water resources perspective. We have been fortunate as Portsmouth Water to have access to plentiful, good quality water historically. But our role is changing as a business from one that just really is very, very local company to one that is working regionally on these challenges, just like everybody else in the rest of the country is. We're facing our own challenges as well. So I have to do the right thing in that situation. And the right thing to do is that if my neighbouring water company comes to me and says that they are going to have to replace effectively the same amount of water as I deliver to all of my customers on a daily basis. So I deliver water to 750,000 customers. That volume, I won't tell you the number, it's water industry gobbledygook, megalitres a day. It's 170 or so megalitres a day. That is the volume of water that my colleagues in Southern are looking to identify and find from alternative sources to reduce the abstractions in the Test and the Itchen and in other areas of Hampshire. So if I say to them, no, I can't work with you. You're not the same sort of company as us. I don't fancy it. I can't say that because there are customers. There are people like all of you who are sitting here this evening who need to have and continue to have those water supplies. And we have to work with each other, whether it's Southern who came to see me, Southeast who came to see me, Thames, anybody. If they have a need to maintain high quality, sustainable water supplies into the future for their customers, I would help them. And that's what I'm here to do.
Thanks, Bob. So we go to questions to the floor again. So we've got a couple at the back here, Jane, if that's okay. There's two next to each other at the back there, so we'll do those two there.
Thank you. The technical presentation was very interesting. There was a mention that the membrane was able to cope with long molecules, polymers. Some of the issues, though, are concerning things like hormones, steroids, female estrogens and so on, which are known to change the sex of fish and so on. So it's not just about big molecules. Can the membrane deal with the smaller molecules, which also could be an issue? That's the one thing. The other thing is, if I could mention the fact that I've got some good friends. I had a letter in the Herald, you might have seen, about cisterns, who in Belgium for donkey's years, they've had cisterns, and so all rainwater from the roof is collected. And so toilets, washing machines and garden watering can all be coped with by this. We have no
is there any way that we, on the same latitude, why are we so far behind? Why isn't there a system to do that? There's a grant of €1,000 when you build a house, you've got to do it, and then it's obligatory. And that means that you can deal with a lot of the water demand, because only about 4% of the water that comes to us we drink, 12% goes through taps. So a vast bulk of it doesn't have to be so pristine. Why can't we do something about grey water? That's my second question.
Okay.
Can you hear me? I will try and project. Right. First question. Thank you. So the first question was about long chain, short chain molecules. As you rightly say, and I think that was part of the presentation that I gave, long, medium, small chain all get addressed at various stages of the membrane filtration process. But the very short chain that actually the industry think may pass through the RO, it's when it gets picked up by the UVAOP, and that gets cleaved, is what we call it, breakdown, at the UVAOP process. And that's where you get that benefit. And that's why the multi-barrier treatment process, the way we've lined it up, actually helps you to do just that. That was a really good question, by the way. I do pretty much what you've just talked about in the second fold of your question, but Sam will answer it from a company standpoint. But I do 100% believe in that as well. Our household litre per head per day is about 81 because of the some of the measures that we take at home for collection water and so on. So that can be done. From a personal standpoint, I do that. But from a company standpoint, I'll leave that to Sam.
As a paragon of water efficiency, Varcha.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah, yes. Poliovirus. Viruses. Correct. Viruses. Polioviruses that have been seen, they've been seen at the inflow of the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant can deal with some of those, but they haven't got those pore size small enough for viruses. And as I was mentioning before, all viruses are not made equal in equal sizes. Some of them get captured by MFUF, that microfiltration, ultrafiltration bit. The RO captures the tiny amount of, smallest size of viruses that you can think of. And in fact, one of the control measures that we look at towards the back end of the treatment is looking at norovirus as an indicator, rotavirus is one, poliovirus we can look at as well. But that membrane treatment process, that is its job to do just that.
Oh, we go.
Yes. And we've seen that in our data results as well.
Yeah. Sam?
I'll use this mic so Jane can get that one ready for the room. Gentleman raised a really good point about water efficiency within domestic properties and what we can do at home. So certainly from Southern Water's perspective, and I know that Jim might want to jump in from Portsmouth Water's perspective about metering and also Portsmouth support for customers in terms of water efficiency. Dual pipe systems are great, but they're really expensive to retrofit in properties. So really it's got to go to government to be pushing developers to install dual pipe systems. We've looked to incentivize developers by giving them a free connection to the water supply system if they demonstrate their properties are water efficient, and that means that they've got tap aerators, they install water efficient appliances, they have smaller baths than the larger baths that you get in some luxury developments, and lots of other interventions like that, which then encourage, and there's a water efficiency pack that goes with that property for new builds. We also actually visit homes of our customers for free and give a water efficiency audit. I had one myself at home. A gentleman came round and fitted tap aerators on showers and taps for me. I already had dual flush systems on my toilet. That was good. The best bit for me was when he sawed through the drain pipe to install the water butt, and my wife and I were stood in the kitchen and we were both relieved it wasn't me doing it because it wouldn't have ended well. But the point there is that there are all sorts of things that companies are doing to drive down water efficiency, or to drive up water efficiency, to drive down water usage. But in terms of the big interventions of dual pipe systems, and we would join you in legislating, in lobbying rather, government to legislate developers for that.
Thank you, Sam. This question at the back.
Good evening, Rosie Blackburn, local resident. You talk about the need for more water. I'm going to talk to you about broken pipes. I read, and I'm sure others will be able to tell me exactly how much water is wasted, but I've just read that it's 500 Olympic swimming pools a day. Tell me how many and quantify it how you will. How many miles, meters, whatever it is, of broken Victorian infrastructure are you replacing each year? I want figures.
Okay, there are leakage is a big challenge for all water companies. We've driven down leakage significantly since privatisation, as I mentioned earlier. Last year, we fixed 20,000 leaks on our network of 14,000 kilometres of water pipes across Kent, Sussex, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So that just gives you an idea of how significant the network is and how many leaks that we're finding and fixing. It's really important that we get our own house in order by fixing leakage before we can turn to customers to say, now can you improve your water efficiency, please? Because we absolutely need to be putting the effort in ourselves. There is what's called an economic level of leakage, whereby you wouldn't chase all leaks. We wouldn't ever get to 100% leak-free system. Leaks are underground, the pipes are underground, they're not always visible, they're very hard to find. You'll see the guys and girls out with listening sticks, they do work, a kind of cup on a stick, listening out for that telltale hiss. It's quite rudimentary method, so actually we're going through a process at the moment of network digitization, where we're putting pressure monitors and sensors in our water pipes to actually predict leaks happening before they already have. And that will then pinpoint where the leak is and dispatch a team automatically to go and fix it. So fast forward 10, 20 years, our leakage improvements and our ability to find and fix leaks are going to be significantly improved. And our commitments to reduce leakage, our leakage is 95 million litres per day. I don't have that figure in my head, I'm afraid.
That's something we can come back with that one if you send it in via email, so Sam can follow up on it.
I would say from my head, it's about a fifth, but because we've supplied 500 and something million litres a day. So forgive me, I will come back to you with an answer for that. We will make sure that that's answered in the Q&As. And so we're driving down leakage by 15% by 2025, 40% by 2040. And 50% by 2050. Now, that's a long lead time, 2050. We recognise that, but it's actually quite a realistic target for finding and fixing leaks and driving that down by 50% across our network. And when we're talking about water recycling as a potential solution, we're talking about finding and fixing leaks as part of that solution as well, because this project doesn't answer the full need, as Bob said, the sheer amount of water that we need to maintain supplies, to protect the rivers. So we've got to tackle leakage, we've got to improve water efficiency, we've got to do a number of things. Hope that
Thanks, Sam. I'm conscious there's lots of people with their hands up. I will try to get around to you, I promise. There's obviously lots of questions coming, so I don't put your hands up when we get to the question stage. Don't keep your hands up. I will keep an eye out and I'll make sure we go around the room. So the next question is from the Hayling Island Residents Association, Havant Climate Alliance, the Havant Friends of the Earth and Save Our Islands. The proposed water, it actually builds on the gentleman's question over here from earlier. The proposed recycling plant will require extensive and expensive construction, and there's concern amongst residents that profit is a significant driver for this project. How is the exercise funded and what's the cost? What extent is profit the driver? Will it result in an increase in bills? And what is the financial agreement proposed between Southern Water and Portsmouth Water? And the final thing is there any plans for a merger or purchase of Portsmouth Water by Southern Water? Lots of questions there. I'm conscious some of them might be towards Portsmouth Water, but start with you, Sam.
Yeah, but by all means, protecting the rivers and serving customers is the driver for this project, not company profits. Absolutely. There will be a cost to the project. We're talking hundreds of millions of pounds. The costs for water supply schemes are spread across our water supply customers across our region. I live across the way in sunny Sussex. I'll be paying for these improvements, as I do for improvements in Kent, etc. as well. And that cost will be shared, as I say, between all customers. What's really important to note with water recycling is actually that it uses less power than desalination, about 10% of the power, and produces twice as much water. So the yield from a water recycling plant is about 80%. So for every 100 litres of water you put in, you get 80 litres of clean water out. For desalination, it's half that, 40 litres. And desalination, because the water is that much dirtier, the seawater, especially with the amount of salt dissolved in the water, you have to push it at much higher pressure through reverse osmosis membranes. So we're producing twice as much water for a tenth of the energy cost. So this is an efficient way of bringing online new technology. And let's remember, over here, we've got the test in the Itchen rivers, internationally designated chalk streams. We're under strict instruction and guidance from the Environment Agency, from Natural England and environmental groups to protect these rivers. We need to find a new source of water that is not from the environment, and this is that source of water. So the cost socialised, yes, bills will increase to absorb that cost, as they will with the 3 other water recycling plants that are across our region, should they receive planning permission, should this one too as well. In terms of financial agreements and so on between Southern Water and Portsmouth Water, we're working really closely together. As Bob has articulately put, we're working really closely to solve this problem together. We've got joint teams, joint working, and discussions about the construction, operation, maintenance of infrastructure that will be the most efficient way of doing so for the companies and for customers as well. And I'm not aware of any plans to merge companies. Bob.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself last time. I know I've met a lot of you before, but I'm Bob Taylor. I'm the CEO of Portsmouth Water. Yeah, no plans to merge at all. It's a close working relationship. Yes, we have an agreement that we signed 2 years ago, something called a bulk supply agreement in relation to the reservoir, which is the agreement that says that we will build it and Southern, through its water customers, will pay for it. So Portsmouth Water customers are not involved in any of this. The agreement we have is we already have 2 existing agreements with Southern to supply water into Hampshire and also into Sussex on each side of our area of supply. So bulk supply agreements are not a new thing. It's quite common for water companies to supply across their boundaries. And I think in the UK broadly, about 5% of water supply is cross-boundary. Is it a profit motive? No, it's not. It's a motive to make sure that everybody in the region has a sustainable water supply, and we protect the environment and we protect against climate change and all of those factors that we've talked about. The industry works on a return on investment model. So it's an industry that needs lots of money to build stuff to maintain the water supply. And that return on the investment paid as the dividend is regulated. So you can't just pay whatever you like to your shareholders as the return for them putting money into your company. It is very strictly regulated by our economic regulator, Ofwat. So there is no incentive. People think that when if you use more water through your meter, we are benefiting from that. It doesn't actually work that way. We're actually incentivized for people to use less. And actually our customers in Portsmouth Water per capita use amongst the highest volumes of water in the UK, which may sound surprising for a region in the southeast. And one of the challenges we have over the next 10 years or so, we'll be promoting smart metering, which will help our customers to become more efficient, as Sam has described. The question earlier about renewals rates, they're typically between 0.5% and 1% by length of network in the UK. We're probably the high end of that range as Portsmouth, but we recognise as an industry that that is not enough, and that is not a Southern or a Portsmouth problem, that is a national problem.
Thank you, Bob. I'm just conscious there's still a lot of questions to get through, and we're already got through the first hour of the public meeting, so I will be kindly reminded to try and keep the answers as succinct as possible, if that's okay, just so we can get the opportunity to answer as many questions as possible. So the next question is from the Climate Alliance, Friends of the Earth, and Peter Oliver, which is, while some are not against the use of water recycling as a last resort, there are a number of more environmentally friendly options for water production, such as extracting excess water when river levels are high and storing them in aquifers and small reservoirs, or utilising freshwater streams in the vicinity of Bud's Farm. Additionally, the government has stated not all decisions must be made now for the next 50 years, citing the early 2030s as a significant decision point. Why are Southern Water making the decision now before alternative solutions to recycling effluent have been fully explored?
I think it's important to recognise that we're looking at a number of different schemes here. As we've said already, with the reservoir that we're building with Portsmouth Water, Southern Water are customers that are paying for that reservoir. And if you look in our water resources management plans, we've got a whole suite of different types of schemes coming online in Hampshire over the next 75 years, and our water resources management plan is out for consultation at the moment. Why are Southern Water making the decision now before alternative solutions have been fully explored? We have fully explored alternative solutions. We've been through a really detailed options appraisal process, looking at a range of solutions to find 90 million litres of water a day that's not from a river, that's not from an aquifer, and now we know from the desalination consultation is not from the sea. Where else to find that amount of water? And so this is where the recycling schemes are the most efficient way of producing this water. And fast forward 50 years, water recycling schemes will be widespread across this country, and we'll see much smaller package plants like they do elsewhere in the world at local wastewater treatment works supplying the water back to customers. Because let's remember that wastewater from homes is 97%-ish water, as the gentleman said, from toilet flushing, from showers, from baths. It's not the human waste element that, you know, obviously is the kind of worrying bit for people in this context. It's water. So you can take the water back out of that and not waste it, and you protect the environment in doing so.
Thanks, Sam. So, okay, question to the floor again. So if you're in the middle of the back there, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask, this whole scheme, which seems I'm unconvinced about, it seems to revolve around the prediction of the water need, and obviously that water need prediction's been made by Southern Water, who's independently verified it.
Allow me to just answer that. So it's a process that is governed nationally by the Environment Agency, and they work on behalf of DEFRA. So we follow very strict government guidelines on the calculations we use to generate population forecasts, which are, someone once told me, all models are wrong, but some are helpful. So, you know, we are having educated guesses about what's happening going forward into the future. We base all the population forecasts on local authority building plans and local plans, and then looking at national statistics data. We take something like 5 or 6 different data sources for that and combine them. And that is a national process that every water company follows the same way. And the whole water resource planning process is a national process. We follow the same steps, because crudely the Environment Agency then piece it all together as a national jigsaw, if that makes sense. So they have a view over the whole country. So it is a governed process. We don't dream these things up. It would make my life easier if we could at some points, possibly, but we have to follow all the due process from the EA, and then the final arbiter of the whole plan is the Secretary of State for Environment. So they sign it off. So our water resource management plans are endorsed by central government. So that's the process. I can go into more detail if you really want.
No, I think that's fine. Any more detailed questions, you can either find them at the end afterwards or email. Yeah, let's say all the time.
Thanks. Since the 1940s, 44 reservoirs in England have been closed, shut down completely. Aren't reservoirs one of the potential sources of new water supply? And in that context, Havant Thicket is only one of 2 new ones. Yeah. So why aren't the new reservoirs being built to provide this water?
Reservoirs are being built. You mentioned Havant Thicket, of course. We have a reservoir in Sussex in our water resources management plan to be brought online in the future as well. This scheme is about making the best use of the Havant Thicket Reservoir as possible. Southern Water paying in excess of £300 million for the reservoir, for Portsmouth Water to construct it. We need to get as much water out of that reservoir as possible to make sure that we can serve customers and protect the environment. You know, this is a water resources infrastructure project that's got all of these amazing environmental added value and biodiversity net gain and so on wrapped around it. And we're working really closely with Portsmouth Water to make sure that those environmental credentials are maintained. But this is a reservoir where, by topping it up or supplementing the flows rather with recycled water, you can negate the need for construction, costly construction, huge lead times, 20+ years, land required, etc. as well. And Portsmouth Water will tell you just how tricky it is to get a reservoir site as fitting as the one at Havant Thicket is.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, do you want to comment on that point?
Yeah, just briefly, just to address the question. Certainly since privatisation, it was environmental policy that before you built a reservoir as a water company, because it was seen to be environmentally damaging, that you had to have addressed your leakage, and you had to make sure that all of your customers were water efficient, i.e. your per capita consumption was low. So proposal after proposal, including Havant Thicket a few years ago, were rejected at policy level. That all changed in 2018 when the National Infrastructure Commission took on board a piece of work that we did as an industry, a national study of projecting future demand, and that concluded that if we carried on with that policy, we would run out of water. So now we are playing catch up with all those reservoirs that we should have built over the period since privatisation, and there are many others that are planned in places like Abingdon and around the country, as well as large regional transfers. There's a massive programme in the pipeline, if you'll excuse the pun, to try to address these regional shortages and improve our resilience.
Thanks, Bob. The next question we have is from Gus Sharkley. Is he here? No? Okay, well, I'll read it out. It's actually a question for Havant Borough Council in particular. So it was, as an extremely concerned customer and also a sufferer of the sewage from Southern Water being pumped into the coastline, can someone from Havant Borough Council explain how you turn a blind eye and allowed Southern Water to involve in the Havant Thicket Reservoir project? You must be aware they may have now changed the plan from the original application, and you want to sneak in millions of litres of recycled effluent in the spring water reservoir. If you're not complicit, then do your duty and put an end to their involvement. And I'll take this directed directly at us as Havant Borough Council. So clearly, we ourselves, Havant Borough Council, we as we've been explained earlier, we are not decision makers in this process. It's a national infrastructure project. It's not going down the Town and Country Planning Act like the original reservoir project did, and that went through a very extensive process where it came before councillors at both Havant Borough Council and East Hampshire District Council for decision. Now, a decision was taken by Southern Water to go down the route of the national infrastructure project, and actually I'll probably throw it to you in a second, Sam, to explain exactly why you went down that route as opposed to the Town and Country Planning Act. So that's where we are, Havant Borough Council, and we're simply one of the consultees on this consultation, and that's why we're very much ensuring that the residents' voices are heard and making sure we have events like tonight to put those views across Southern Water and representing your feelings as that process goes through and the water recycling process goes through. I mean, and Sam, maybe you want to just come on now onto why you decided to go down the route of not going to the local council decision-making process, and why you went down the national route and sort of sidetracking the councils. Sam.
I'll take that one, thank you. So the scheme affects 8 different authorities, including the county council: Hampshire, Eastleigh, Fareham, Havant, Portsmouth, South Downs National Park Authority, Winchester and East Hants. The DCO process, which is what the national significant infrastructure projects follow to get a planning consent, provides an opportunity to consolidate the planning process through one body. And for that to be considered against national policy, which has specifically been put in place for this very purpose, to deal with big, complex, large-scale projects. As set out before, there will be numerous opportunities, obviously, to provide feedback on the project as it's developed through that process. And we've talked about previously how the local authority, particularly Havant, is already involved in that. So if we were looking at a separate planning process through the town and country planning process, it wouldn't just be Havant. There would be 7 other authorities involved as well. Hence why it's far more efficient, far more sensible to go through the planning inspectorate route.
Thank you. So we'll move over to actually questions from the floor again. I'm conscious we have questions on the far side, Jane. Do you want to do some questions from the far end down that way?
Thank you. Oh God, it's spring water. I've heard how dirty that is. Currently, you've got planning consent to construct the reservoir at Haddon Thicket, 8,600 million litres, I think. And that's to be filled with spring water, heard how dirty that is, and presumably rainwater fall off. So why do you need to pump water treated, what is it, wastewater recycled from Otterbourne or to Otterbourne? If it holds 8,600 million litres of rainwater and spring water, then that's the capacity of the reservoir. Why do you necessarily need to spend all of that
so the
time and technology and money in transporting wastewater, cleaning it, pumping it in the reservoir, and then pumping it back out again?
No, that's a very fair question, and we'll go to Sam again. It's about the capacity of and why is it we need this when the reservoir is already being filled by spring water?
Yeah, thank you. So the Havant Thicket Reservoir is 8.7 billion litres, so very, very big. The reservoir would be fed by spring water, which currently is flowing. There's excess water at the moment, surplus to Portsmouth Water's needs, and that water flows out into Langston Harbour and out into the Solent, and it's wasted. And that spring water is really clean and can be used as a drinking water source. So Portsmouth Water scheme, as approved, is to pump some of that water up to the reservoir to fill the reservoir with that spring water. Now that spring water is ephemeral. It runs during wet weather and the winter months. In dry weather, the springs will fall away and that water won't be available to be pumped up to the reservoir. So this scheme is a drought scheme. This project is about maintaining supplies for our customers during a drought by supplementing the reservoir at a time when the spring water will have naturally fell away. There'll be nothing to be pumped into the reservoir. Water will be taken from the reservoir during a drought and that level will be going down. So by supplementing the flows in the reservoir, we can increase the capacity or increase the yield from the reservoir and therefore have more water to supply to customers during a drought.
So either this plan was...
I'm just conscious that we're not. There's lots of questions to get through, and I don't want to have follow-up questions because otherwise no one will have a chance to ask questions. So another question from over that side of the room, please, if that's okay. Is there another question from that side of the room over that way?
I'm Viola from Portsmouth, and we've talked a lot about water today, but we all know that we are in an energy crisis. And when we look at this project, it looks to me like it will actually require a lot of energy. Now, when we haven't got that energy, what's going to happen to our water? And I think we really have to consider that, particularly reverse osmosis will be very energetic, pumping water from one end to another, building those structures and working all those plants constantly will require a lot of energy. So how are we dealing with this?
So you're absolutely right that this will use a significant amount of energy. As I mentioned earlier, it's a lot less energy needed than in a desalination process. We don't have many options to find this water that's not from a river, not from an aquifer, now not from the sea. We need technology to pick up the slack where the environment has previously done so. Renewable energy, Southern Water buys all of its energy from renewable sources. We and all UK water companies are committed to being net zero zero by 2030. So we are factoring in new infrastructure into those plans, of course, to make sure that we continue to be net zero. We're looking at the opportunity to use renewable energy wherever possible to power the site. At the moment, Bud's Farm Treatment Works is 90-something% self-sufficient for its own electricity because we generate electricity on site through a combined heat and power plant. I won't go into it now, but it's fascinating technology. And we have 18 of those engines at wastewater treatment works across our region. And we're going to be putting another one in at Bud's Farm because as the population grows, there's more waste. There's therefore more energy to be produced. So, there could be a potential for tapping into some of that as a source. But in terms of energy resilience for this country, again, a matter for government, I think, to look at centralised, localised energy supplies, especially for national infrastructure such as water. I'm not sure if Portsmouth Water want to contribute to this response at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair challenge and a fair question. We have set ourselves challenging targets as an industry. We're continuing to invest in solar energy at the moment. Wherever we've got spare space at our treatment plant sites, we're putting that in. In terms of the reservoir construction, the site we're very fortunate to have the site because the material to build the embankment around the edge of the site is there on the site. You dig it out of the ground. It's very high quality clay and it's good for making a waterproof embankment. So we can't get away from the energy usage to do all of that with the plant and the equipment that we need to do that. But we will offset it as much as we can through other sites and other renewable sources to try and get to the net zero balance.
Okay, thanks, Bob. The next question is from Anne Buckley. I think Anne's in the room somewhere. Yeah, Anne. So, Anne, do you want to answer your question, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Southern Water's consultation document have not made it clear that the Hampshire water transfer and water recycling project proposal would change the source of Portsmouth water customers' water supply to treated effluent water. I actually had to ring Bob Taylor because most people were thinking that the effluent recycled water was going to Otterbourne, and that was partly because of how this was laid out in your consultation document. And I noticed today the recycling diagram which Varsha put up has actually changed a little bit. Number 6, it just showed the water flowing onto Otterbourne, whereas now you have a little house with homes and businesses. So I think that's supposed to mean that it comes down to Farlington and then goes on to the customers in Portsmouth and Gosport and Fareham and to us locally here. I and many others feel that the documents have been very opaque and haven't been clear. And it's only in recent times when I contacted Bob Taylor, who gave me a reply to say that we would be receiving water that was based on effluent recycling. I let Havant Borough Council know and found that none of the councillors seemed to know anything about this either. They were all under the impression that the water was going elsewhere. And it's, I believe also the next day, both the water companies were called in here for a discussion. We're very late in the process now. The consultations finish in a few days' time, and it's extraordinary that it's taken this long to get the truth about where this recycled water will be going to. So basically, my question was: many people have said that the documents are opaque, and do you agree with that?
Thanks, Alan. I think that's a very pertinent question. I think one that certainly from my end I've had concerns about is regarding slight shifting sands of where we've come from the application and where, like, certainly as I'm sure others would agree, where we were in the process when this was first announced as a project that was sending water towards neighbours in Southampton, and I think this is one I think we'd like to sort of have cleaned up once and for all as to how this changes the water supply in our area, Bob.
Well, it's not like a reservoir that's in 2 compartments where you've got spring water in one compartment and recycled water in the other compartment. I think the thing that concerns people is that people think that the recycled water is an inferior quality water, and that is a fair perception, I suppose, but it isn't really, because of the quality of the treatment that water actually gets. But yeah, those two sources of water mixed together in the reservoir, it's one reservoir with two sources of water feeding it. And there are two ways of extracting water from that reservoir as well. One is via the pipeline to Otterbourne, and that is what we call a raw water supply, an untreated water supply. It's treated at Otterbourne. And the other one is to the Farlington, our existing Farlington treatment works as Portsmouth Water, where there is a treatment process there. So it comes in from two directions, it goes out from two directions as well.
I think the point, Bob, is that at the moment we have excess water, so that's why the reason we've got the reservoir. So if in 10 years' time we turn our taps on here and haven't, are we going to be getting a mixture of the reservoir water and Southampton spring water, or are we going to be getting what we're getting at the moment? So I think that's what we're trying to hit the nail on the head here, Bob.
It will be different, yes. It will be a mixture of water, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, so well, Bob, do you want to ask the question about that way we're remaining as Portsmouth Water customers?
Yes, you will remain as Portsmouth Water customers, and we will operate the reservoir, even though one of the feeds is coming in from southern site.
Thanks. The next question is from Susan. Oh, yes, please do, Sam. Yeah.
And just to answer your question about the documents being opaque, I'm genuinely sorry that you and others have felt like that. I was one of the team who was involved in drafting those documents and trying to simplify and explain what's an incredibly complex, set of pipes and pumps and treatment technologies. We've worked with a supplier and external experts, as well as our own customer team, to make sure that the language that we're using is simple and able to be understood by a wide variety of customers. The drop-in sessions were hosted to make sure that customers had a chance to ask us for their views, etc. But I've made a note of that, and we'll take that feedback back to make sure that we are explaining in sufficient detail. I mean, perhaps we can pick up a conversation afterwards about the conversations you've had with people in the community about the type of information they wanted to see and how they'd want that to be presented to them, because we want to make sure that people understand the plans and therefore can support them.
Thanks. The next question we've got here is from Susan Oliver. Is Susan in the room? No, so I'll read it out. It's quite a specific question. So, will there be at least 2 independent shut-off valves before the water reaches the reservoir? And what other source of drinking water, Portsmouth Water area, will there be if the reservoir is unable to be used by Portsmouth Water? Yeah.
So on the control of the reservoir, that is absolutely right. The other feature that will be included is a non-return valve. Because as I said, as we pump flow up to the reservoir, we also want to protect the site on the way down. So if there was any challenges, we want to stop reservoir water from coming down into the facility as well. So it's not just dual control of valves to protect water going up, but it's also water coming back down to the treatment, to the water recycling plant. You can take the second one. Thank you.
In terms of alternative sources of water, we've talked, and I've mentioned desalination at length and the other schemes that we've explored and that we're undertaking. But ultimately, until our solution is completed, we're relying on drought permits and drought orders, and these allow water companies to take more water than their abstraction licenses allow from the environment to maintain supplies to customers. So we're stuck in a position where we're relying on drought permits and drought orders from the River Test and River Itchen in order to maintain supplies for customers. So it's imperative that we develop a solution as soon as possible so that we don't have to do that.
Bob, just briefly.
Yeah, just to illustrate, I think we heard earlier on from Barsha that all of the normal controls that will be in place, all of the monitoring and the equipment and the technology that make sure that even today, if one of my plants fails, we get dirty water through our plants because if it rains very heavily, it causes the water in the aquifer to get dirty. If it comes through our plants and it's not suitable for humans to consume, the plant gets shut off automatically. So all of those protections that exist already around, water production facilities, not just in our areas here, but around the industry. These will all apply in this particular case, including, shut-off valves, motorized, controlled, and so on. We can run our system without the reservoir. So if the reservoir has to be totally isolated, we can run the system as we do today.
Thanks, Bob. So questions from the floor. Faith, just here. And the guy in the red jumper after that.
Thank you. Faith Ponsonby, a former Lee Park councillor. I wanted to raise the promise that was made when the Thicket Reservoir was built or was planned. And it was a promise that was made that it would be environmentally pleasant. Instead, we had ancient woodlands knocked down in Staunton Park, a very precious area for Lee Park residents. It was also the pipeline that was going to take water up and down was carefully thought out that it would be minimal disruption to the houses that were there. However, I now see from the presentation that you're going to be putting pipes tunneling underneath homes, disturbing residents and all sorts of other things. I don't know what the consultation process for is, but you can see why Lee Park residents feel that we have been sold a wolf in sheep's clothing. Thank you.
Thanks, Faith. So maybe Bob, the first part on the environmental aspects of the reservoir and the waste of water on the pipes in particular. Well, pipes both then.
Yeah, okay. I'll take the pipes one first. Actually, the proposal we have made, which we're consulting on at the moment, has one objective in mind and one only, and that is to absolutely reduce to a minimum the disruption that residents will have while these pipes are being constructed. Because the original proposal, for which we had planning permission granted, assumed that all of the pipes, other than the occasional crossing of a railway or something like that, all of these pipes will be constructed through trenches with lots of heavy plant and machinery around the streets of the Lee Park area, constructing this, what we call an open cut pipeline. The proposal we put forward puts nearly all of it into a tunnel. So other than at specific points, the pipe will go horizontally. It won't have any impact on houses. There won't be any noise, won't be any vibration or anything like that. It is, from a resident's point of view, a very much better scheme and will minimize or reduce massively the disruption compared with doing it the alternative way. But it's a different proposal. It's a different route, and that's why we're consulting on it. And we will have to go back to our colleagues that haven't to get approval for that. Going back to the point about the reservoir site, yes, we do regret that 12.5 hectares of ancient woodland were lost. But within our environmental mitigation plan, we have either, we plan to either upgrade or plant new about 200 hectares compared with the 12.5 hectares. So we are putting much more back than we've taken away. I know these aren't mature trees that are hundreds of years old, but it is new greenery. And we've been careful to identify all the flora and fauna that live on the site, to capture them, the bats, the dormice, relocate them, build corridors, to obviously ensure that they don't get caught up in the construction work. So we've tried to make it. We try to work as strongly as we possibly can to minimise the environmental damage.
Thanks, Bob. So there's a question, the red jumper at the back there, Jane. Red jumper. Oh, okay.
Sorry, can you hear me? Right, I'm David West. I'm a former engineer of both Portsmouth Water and Southern Water. So it's interesting, this talk. Quite a few questions. They talked about leakage in the area, and Bob Taylor correctly gave an idea of what percentage Portsmouth Water had been doing, and he's right, because I was doing a lot of it. What percentage of Southern Water's mains are replaced every year?
Have you got a number of questions? I'm conscious there's a lot of questions to get through. If you've got if you can keep to try and sum up your questions into one or two more, and we'll run through them if that's okay. Let's say we're running out of time.
Right. Okay. That's one question. You talked about this effluent being of even higher quality than the spring water in terms of nitrates. I would worry about that. But if the effluent that can be created from a sewage plant can be at such high standard, why aren't you using Peel Common plant as your source of water? You've got the land, you could build the plant there. You won't be disrupting the towns nearby. You won't be digging in a tip that's full of leachates that can go into the Langstone Harbour, which is a serious problem. So I was engineer at Peel Common Sewage Works.
Right, I know. I think all good questions, but I'm conscious we've got so many more in the room, so we'll pause there and Sam takes questions. We'll move on to the next question. If that's okay.
Can you come back to me in a minute?
If we get time at the end, I'm conscious of lots of questions to get through. Sam.
I'm afraid I don't have our renewal rate in.
But there are also lots of people in the room that want to ask questions, and there's an awful lot of people at that time. So, Sam.
I'm afraid I don't know our renewal rate in my head, like Bob does for Portsmouth Water, but we'll make sure that that is addressed in the Q&As that are picked up after the meeting. And then in terms, yeah.
Is Southern Water doing that? I don't think so.
I'm sure we're replacing water mains. I don't have the figure. I don't have the figure in my head. I'm sorry. I can't have all this data in my head. I've got quite a lot in my head, but not that, I'm afraid. And I'm going to pass to James now.
And Peel Common.
Yeah.
Same question on Peel Common.
So for the question on Peel Common, I can answer that for you. So as we've articulated, this project is about utilising that storage capacity within Havant Thicket Reservoir. If we built the water recycling plant at Peel Common, we'd be needing to put in another 26 kilometres worth of pipeline in to be able to bring that water across to Havant Thicket Reservoir to then be able to discharge back over. So the impact would be greater by doing it. The other thing as well is it starts becoming a capacity issue with regards to the flows available in Peel Common.
Okay, well, the question's been answered. So the gentleman in the red jumper is impatiently waiting here.
In the presentation, you explained that there's a 50-year plan. Everything is thought ahead 50 years. But I'm just a bit confused as to why 2 or 3 years ago, when the application went in, this wasn't thought about then. And I'm just picking up from Councillor Rennie, the comment that the system for planning application and approval then was a local decision, and now it's a government decision. So this just, if I was being cynical, I would say this is planning by stealth.
I'll come to you. Yeah. I can see how it looks like that, but that is significantly not the case. When the Portsmouth Water planning application was submitted back in 2021, I believe, for the Havant Thicket Reservoir, the water recycling plans were Plan B. We were consulting at that time on the desalination plans and taking that forward with gusto to deliver that project. The water recycling plans were developed to enough extent to be available as a Plan B, but the water resources management plan, that forward-looking document that you referenced, which looks forward 50, 75 years, was identifying desalination as the selected option for this area for Hampshire. We discussed with planners at Havant at the time of the submission of the application for Havant Thicket Reservoir, the complexities around the backup option, the water recycling option, the fact that it wasn't developed to sufficient capacity or sufficient detail to be incorporated within the planning application, because you wouldn't develop a plan B to that level of detail. We didn't expect to be doing this. We thought we might, and that's why we've proposed it. But I can see how it looks, but it really isn't the case. And Ian's got a bit more detail, I'm sure, on the planning application process.
I'm conscious we've kind of touched on this a number of times. Lots of questions are green, so we'll leave that one there, if that's okay, Sam. The next question was from, yeah, that's absolutely. So the next question was from Dave Parr, and it's hopefully a very quick one for you, Bob. So, is Portsmouth Water looking for a change the abstraction license, and if so, how?
Yes, we are. So an abstraction license is granted for a specific activity. Our activity is changing. So at the moment we have a license that's granted for, I forget the exact phrasing, but direct public water supply. We need to get the addition of and filling the reservoir onto our abstraction license. So we'll be going through an amendment with the Environment Agency to do that.
Thank you. So we've got questions before, and I'm conscious again, time's running low, so keep your questions succinct and answers succinct, please. So question, the middle of the back here. Oh, sorry, actually, Jenny, actually, have in the back of the room there. We'll go back of the room over there first, then we'll come back to the middle here.
Peter Oliver, I'd like to know how much this scheme is going to cost and how much we're going to pay for it. And a supplementary question to that is, you are a pair of privatized companies, and what is missing from privatization, of course, is accountability. And we're here tonight seeking public accountability, and I don't see a structure being proposed which would allow that accountability to take place other than these consultations.
So quite, I say that's fine. So I think costs we sort of touched upon, but accountability, Sam, do you quickly, or one of the ones to come in on that?
Yeah, sorry, I do need to correct you on one point. We are a 170-year-old company as Portsmouth Water, and we've always been a private company.
But do you want to just come in on point on sort of just in terms of public accountability for the plans and how that's going to be going forward?
Well, I mean, people here may not feel this, but making sure that our customers are supportive of our business plans and what we do in the future are absolutely key to what makes us tick as Portsmouth Water. We are the smallest water company in the UK. We're a local company, and making sure that customers are on board with that, it's really important, and that's through a whole range of different activities. Firstly, all of our employees are local people, and we get a lot of feedback via that route. We offer things out for consultation regularly. We spend a lot of time going out to various societies and organisations around the patch, giving presentations and seeking feedback back through that route. But in terms of accountability, there is no industry that is more regulated than the water industry. We have literally dozens of regulators, probably 5 or 6 major ones, and we're accountable to our regulators as kind of pseudo customers almost, to make sure that we always do the right thing.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's not as visual as it should be, perhaps.
Yeah.
And regulators are under pressure at the moment as well.
Yeah. Thanks. So, any other questions at the back, Jane, around that way?
Hi, I didn't have a question, but I do now. What is your definition of zero? Because at the end of the day, all of us here, we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. The trees and all the plants, they breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen. So your plans for zero carbon emissions, that would mean you wouldn't have any workers. What does that mean by zero?
Who wants to comment on that? Bob?
Yeah, we haven't figured a way yet to running the company without people, but I'd make a lot of money if I knew that. No, I think we're talking about net zero, so it's a balancing act, if you like. That the ways that we save carbon are counterbalancing the carbon that we consume, basically.
Thanks. Next question from Pat Brooke. Is Pat here? I think she is somewhere, isn't she? No. Oh. So it's a question, should I read it out for brevity of time, or it's on the reservoir comes online, stop reduce extraction.
When the reservoir comes online, will this stop or reduce the extraction of water from the Ems and its aquifers, which cause it to run dry in summer? And it used to run all year.
So, sorry, I can't see who I'm talking to, but I'll talk to that end of the room. So no, the reservoir isn't linked to our plans to reduce abstraction from the Ems. What we're planning to do is offset the water we will reduce our take from the Ems with savings made through water efficiency and the use of water meters through our customer base. So that hopefully will allow people to use less water, and the savings we make, we won't have to abstract from the Ems. So that's the balance we're making in that space.
Thank you. The next question is from Tracy Viney. Tracy, Jane, just there.
Thank you. I'm a Southern Water customer and I'm from the Warsash area, and I can tell you that absolutely nobody in that area knows about this consultation or Southern Water's plans for effluent recycling. So the whole idea of open consultation and discussion is a myth, and 3 months in, that's an absolute disgrace, Southern Water. My question is, why is Southern Water pressing ahead and relying on one big effluent recycling solution when you have not even assessed the environmental impact on the reservoirs and the harbour? And have you not learnt the lesson from putting all your eggs in the desalination basket 5 years ago when that was rejected because the environmental impact was too great? The alternative to desalination was never Bud's Farm to Havant Thicket. The alternative to desalination was effluent recycling to the River Itchen, which I understand the Environment Agency has rejected. So this was never a public domain alternative that was on the books.
We've talked already at length about the need for more water in this area, and I think that's clearly accepted. We've talked at length about the range of solutions that Southern Water have explored and the range of solutions that we are pursuing to make up that shortfall as well. You're right that initially our proposals for water recycling involved, or one of the options involved, the River Itchen. That would involve putting recycled water into the River Itchen and then re-abstracting further down. In fact, we already put treated wastewater into the River Itchen from our Chickenhall treatment works up at Eastleigh. So 800 litres a second of highly treated wastewater goes into the Itchen at Eastleigh, and 800 litres a second is flowing through that river day in, day out. During drought, a vast bulk of that river's supply or flow is made up of treated wastewater. And when we've talked to the Environment Agency about putting a water recycling plant up at Chickenhall, they've said absolutely not, because the treated wastewater that you put in actually supports the river during dry weather and a drought. The concerns the Environment Agency had about the use of the River Itchen for recycled water were change in temperature and water chemistry, and the impact that could have on the environmental designations on the Itchen. It's under what's called CSMG, Common Standards Monitoring Guidance. And so we look for alternatives of how else can we use water recycling to make up the shortfall that we face. And I won't go back into the argument that I've presented thus far.
Thank you. It's a question just the middle of the room. Just there, that just been there. Sorry, I nearly came to you last time. There we are.
The first one is, given the discharges at Thornham in January, and I believe that that was supposedly down to telemetry, how can we rely on the telemetry to take out the endocrine disruptors and estrogens and things like that that would otherwise be harming us? And the second question is for Varsha. Do you say that 100% of endocrine and synthetic estrogens will be taken out of the system?
I'll answer the second question first. Okay. I can touch on the first one, but I'm going to start with the second one. What our data has seen thus far? God, just so I thought I was projecting. What our data shows us thus far on all the PPCBs, I'm not going to go each and every one, that's pharmaceutical and personal care product. We are achieving over 99.5% removal. So we know the data never tells you 100% because in the limits of quantification, you have this problem. Yeah, sure. Yep.
Enough to have an effect on organisms in the sea, and they're just swimming around in it.
Yeah.
We're going to be drinking it.
They don't get up. The swimming pool water contains chlorine, and chlorine does nothing for it. Right. Yeah. Correct. But in a multi-barrier treatment process that we've put together, that's where the chances of that happening is significantly reduced. And that's what we need to remember. That's that significant reduction because of the waste.
I'm conscious that we are running very short of time. I'm not sure we'd love a debate. We are running short of time. Sam, quickly on the first point. Yeah. Sam.
Yep, thank you. And just to add to that multi-barrier treatment, remember that any water abstracted from the reservoir will go to a water supply works for the full drinking water treatment as well, and all of the processes that are involved in that, which we don't have time to go into now, but which you can find more information about on our website as well. In terms of telemetry, that Thornham issue was regrettable in the extreme. For people to have thought and for it to be impacted by a potential stormwater release for a month. And you know, it was awful, frankly. And I read that and saw that, and I felt for the fishermen, the beach users, harbour users, etc. in that area, and the impact that would have on them. And we feel really responsible for that at Southern Water, and that's why we share this information through Beach Boy and promote that information. Not all telemetry is made equal. The type of telemetry on a wastewater treatment works on a combined sewer overflow operates on the height of water within a chamber, and all sorts of things can disrupt that telemetry. The telemetry that Varsha's describing, one in the water recycling process, is very different in terms of its kind of precision of the things that it's monitoring, etc. And as telemetry improves on the stormwater side of the business, then we'll be installing that to make sure that we don't have those issues where we're trying to rebuild trust and faith in our company, and then we have a mistake like that which just undermines it for weeks on end.
Okay, Sam, it's just we're running very close to 7 o'clock, so we'll take 2 more questions. There's one right behind you, Jane, and there's another one just there. So those last 2 questions.
Me again. This is for you specifically, Councillor Rennie. What now can, what or who can stop this?
So, I said at the start of the process, the Hampton Borough Council, we are a consultee in this process. So the Southern Water have gone down the national infrastructure route. We are making the concerns we've got and our residents heard, and that will be going through the national process, which will eventually work its way through government. So we are in that process. We are with you all, highlighting the concerns of residents, highlighting these issues we're talking about tonight, and we're going to keep doing that as we go forward, and hopefully continue with more dialogue, more conversation with residents, and trying to get more answers from Southern Water. Just got very quickly, Sam.
I just want to be just. Yep. Absolutely. So there's a consultation out at the moment, which is on our water resources management plan. That closes on the 20th of February. And then either later this year or early next year, we'll have a further consultation as part of the development consent order process on the proposals as well. So there'll be a load of engagement and consultation between now and the applications. And we really welcome views to help us shape the plans over that time. But don't think that the 20th of February Water Resources Management Plan consultation is the only opportunity to feedback and make your views known.
I'm conscious of 7 o'clock, and there's actually one question that someone mentioned haven't actually touched upon it yet, actually, which is quite worth answering, which is about compulsory purchase orders. And in terms of the process of compulsory purchase orders, and can you just explain sort of where we're going in terms of requiring those, and we'll leave it on that final point.
There's one more question.
Yes. Take that one.
Yeah. Hello. Actually, I'm going to ask something else as well to start with. First of all, nobody's really dealt with the taste of the water, which is a really big issue. And do you think that people in their thousands are going to start drinking bottled water? I mean, that's a really massive issue in a time when we're supposed to be cutting down on plastics. My second thing, which I think is really important, is the way that Southern Water have been treating people. Here we have here the public face of Southern Water, very pleasant and you know, to the people here. However, we've had at least 2 landowners who are on the pipeline route to Otterbourne who have proposed the 4-foot pipeline going through their property, and they've alternately been offered money, threatened with compulsory purchase orders, and police forcing entry to their properties. Are these the bully boy tactics that the people of Havant and the rest of the people on the Otterbourne route have got to expect if they object to the pipeline? Can you categorically state that no one else will be threatened with compulsory purchase orders? I'm aware that the pipeline route has now changed, but it's still a very big issue for people.
So there are two questions. Okay.
Sam,
So there are
answer question. We're at 7 o'clock.
There are, yeah, sorry, Alex. There are two questions here. One's about taste. Any change in water source would be expected to impact taste and affect taste, just as if we have water coming from a river versus water coming from an aquifer. When I go and visit my family up in Yorkshire, my hair's nice and glossy, but I don't like the taste of the tea because the water's very soft. And so we'll be blending the recycled water to mirror the water that's in the reservoir so that we're reducing any potential impact of taste. I'm really conscious of the sternly worded letters that went out in terms of us requiring access to land to purely to see what environmental constraints might be there, and we had to go through a whole exercise of undoing the damage of those initial letters, which were clunky in the extreme, and which actually really unduly raised concerns with people about compulsory purchase orders. And so we've been out to contact customers on an individual basis to talk through these issues with them, to make sure that they understand that we're not looking to compulsory purchase land. We'll be tunnelling underneath land. We were looking for environmental impacts at the surface that could be impacted, and that in terms of farmland, we're working with land agents on that open cut technique of digging a trench is the most efficient way of working. But if anyone has a letter from us, if anyone has contact from us, then please do respond to that letter, because the team are on hand and they understand that the concerns that have been raised initially need to be addressed with individuals on an individual basis. So please do get in contact with us.
Thank you very much. And I think Barnes' question on purchase orders, and I'm conscious it's 7 o'clock, and we did promise that we'd end the meeting at 7 p.m. So I do thank everyone who came here tonight and who are watching at home, and those from the 2 water companies who have taken the time to answer our questions. I particularly found it very useful to hear the views of residents tonight, and we'll again, as I said, be including those in our response to the consultation. Any outstanding questions, you can also submit them to us, ask us at havant.gov.uk, and we'll ensure you get an answer. So thank you very much. The recording of the website and the building is on the way out the way you came. Thank you very much.